Every single chance there was to drink, people took advantage of. Every single social situation, for the most part, at least in the circle of people that I was hanging around, alcohol was the center of that. Thursday, Friday, Saturday, people were drinking. If it was St. Patrick's Day, alcohol. If it was a sports game, alcohol. If it was bachelor night with your girlfriends, alcohol is involved. Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, my name is Haley and I help people recognize their full potential by exploring all aspects of the mind-body connection. Today we've got another pillow talk coming your way. I've got my little pillow here. I've got my bubbly. Why did I just say it like that? I've got my bubbly. It's been so long since I've done a pillow talk, but I really wanted to sit down and talk about my experience being alcohol free and some of the things that people don't tell you will happen when you stop drinking alcohol. If you don't know, I am 3.5 years alcohol free and I would not change that for the world. Removing alcohol from my life has absolutely transformed my life. It's led me to so many opportunities, so much physical growth and change. It's led me to the job that I have today. It's absolutely been so transformative, but there's some things that I feel like people don't talk about when it comes to alcohol. One being alcohol use and how our society can normalize problematic drinking and binge drinking. And the other part of that is things that will happen when you stop drinking that nobody really warns you or tells you about. So if that's of interest to you, like I said, grab a snack, grab a beverage. We're gonna go ahead and dive right into it. I guess a good place to start with all of this would be my experience with alcohol, just so you guys have an understanding of where I'm coming from with this stuff. I want to add the disclaimer that I never went to AA, I never did a formal recovery program. I just kind of came to the conclusion on my own that alcohol was really not serving me. So please know that in everything that I sort of share with you here today. Flashback, back in time, backtrack to Haley high school age. I was a goody two-shoes in high school, okay? I did not have a sip of alcohol. I remember my friends on prom night like sneaking wine in and I was like, no, I'm not gonna do that. I was super goody two-shoes. I didn't drink until the summer before I went to college. So I think I was like 18 years old at the time. You know, as college culture does, I think to a lot of people, glorified alcohol abuse. I was consuming so much alcohol in my college years and it's really alarming to think about in hindsight because, and I don't know if anyone else can relate to this, but if you are a part of Western culture, if you went to college, if you lived on campus, right? I think it's such a normal experience for us to drink very heavily and to an extreme every single weekend. Every single chance there was to drink, people took advantage of. Every single social situation, for the most part, at least in the circle of people that I was hanging around, alcohol was the center of that. Thursday, Friday, Saturday, people were drinking. If it was St. Patrick's Day, alcohol. If it was a sports game, alcohol. If it was bachelor night with your girlfriends, alcohol is involved. Alcohol was the center of, I would be willing to say, 85 to 90% of my social interactions in college beyond the classroom and the scholastic setting. And I don't know if anybody can relate to that. That was at least my experience. And the other part of that too is that drinking was so normalized, A, and B, encouraged to the point that if somebody wasn't drinking or if they chose not to drink, it was almost like something was wrong with them. And I will say in hindsight, I participated in that mindset of thinking if somebody wasn't drinking, like, oh, they're so lame that they're not drinking. But there were plenty of people I was friends with that were athletes that were taking care of their bodies and doing the right thing. And in hindsight, I'm like, I want to apologize to those people because it's just so crazy to think in hindsight that you would be judged for not drinking. So I just want to explain that's sort of like where the drinking pattern started for me. I was never somebody who had to drink every night. I want to make that clear. There's a lot of different ways that people can abuse alcohol. It's a spectrum. There is no set formula, right, to understand that you're having issues with alcohol use. I think that's something you'll have to kind of sit with yourself and examine. And if you're even questioning it, then odds are you probably should look to change your relationship with alcohol. But for me, it was never having a glass of wine every night. It was never having a drink every night. I would be fine to get through the week, you know, doing my schoolwork and doing whatever I was doing. But once Thursday, Friday, and Saturday rolled around, I would drink in excess. And that was every single weekend that I was in college, like without fail. I can probably count on one hand the number of weekends in college that I didn't drink. And that was probably either because it was like finals week, although I actually, like, I even drank like the night before my finals, but it was probably if I was really sick or something, that would be the only time that I wouldn't drink. Otherwise, I was drinking every single weekend and to total excess. You may be surprised by what is actually considered binge drinking from a medical standpoint and from a physical standpoint. I think I have to research again. I think the stat is like 5 or more drinks in a 2-hour time span for men and 4 more drinks in a 2-hour time span for women. So that's a really shocking statistic, right? I'm gonna put it on the screen in case I'm wrong with it or something, but whenever I tell people that, they're like, what? There's no way that that's actually considered binge drinking, because the people that I was hanging around and the things that I was doing back then, 4 drinks was like the warm up. Like that was like, you're just getting the night started. I would regularly have a 12-pack of spiked seltzers. I was a big tequila fan, and I actually remember there was one night that I drank over half a handle of vodka and I was still looking for more alcohol. So if that doesn't scream that like somebody should slow their roll, I don't know what would. But that's just to kind of paint a picture for you of what drinking was for me in college. Now I also want to add to that if you were to look at me or if you were to interact with me, you would probably not suspect that I had any sort of issue with it. I was doing well in my classes. I was showing up, you know, I was eating healthy, I would go to the gym. But for me, it was like when the weekend would roll around, the self-control switch in my mind would just completely shut off. It was never enough for me. That pattern followed me even after I left college into a corporate setting where I noticed that drinking culture is just as glamorized, if not more glamorized than it was in a college setting. Because in college, you've got parties, you've got, you know, wine nights, you've got going out to the bars, you've got this, you've got that, you got games to tailgate, games to pregame for, and it's just really heavily ingrained, at least in Western culture, as part of that college experience. And I noticed once I transitioned out of college and into the corporate world that alcohol was still the center stage of most social interactions and most ways that people were encouraged to unwind and relax and like take a load off and connect with other coworkers. For example, anyone out there who has a corporate job, I'm sure you can relate to this, but like happy hour is a huge thing. You get out of work, what do? You go to grab a drink. The corporate job that I had actually had alcohol in the building. So like once the workday ended, people were encouraged to like grab a drink on their way out if they wanted to. If there was ever like a coworker, you know, socialization activity, alcohol was always the center of that. It was never like, oh, let's do a workout class together, let's do this. It was always, oh, let's grab drinks after work. The boozy brunches were a huge part of that too when I was in that corporate setting. So I just noticed that yet again, alcohol seemed to be center stage of so much of what we do. And it's like, you'd think that we'd be done with that in college, right? And for some of us, we were. I think there's a lot of people that kind of stopped drinking in college and sort of got on with it, but for me, I wasn't able to let go of that pattern because it had become a pattern. Because for every single weekend for 4 years, I was consuming heavy amounts of alcohol, and that was like what I did. And if you guys understand anything about how alcohol works with your brain and with dopamine and everything, I'm gonna leave a link to a podcast episode I did with my friend Bardia. He does a great job of explaining it, but your brain becomes dependent on it. And things that will normally give you dopamine and normally produce a dopamine spike for you in your life will not give you the same feeling and will not feel as good anymore because alcohol has totally wrecked your body's dopamine response. That was a cycle that I was caught in, and it followed me into the corporate world. And I had a few moments where, you know, I took it way, way, way too far. Anytime that I took it that far and I would tell myself I was never gonna drink again, I never listened. It wasn't enough for me to snap out of it. It wasn't enough for me to wake up from that cycle of being hungover, feeling like shit, not being able to get anything done. To no avail. The next weekend I would turn around and drink again. Even in college, this happened so many times, and I'm not saying this to like throw shade at anyone I was friends with. At least in the college party setting, it's almost funny if someone blacks out, right? It's funny if someone got so drunk that they're throwing up, and it's a laugh and it's something to joke about the next day when somebody's so fucked up they don't remember what they did. They wake up in a place that they don't even know where they are. And it's kind of sad in hindsight to think that that was something that was taken so lightly at that time. It's so damaging mentally, physically, emotionally, financially for a lot of people too. Alcohol is expensive, especially if you're a college kid. It still doesn't sit right with me that it's such a part of that experience. And I have my own theories on it too. I've thought about this of like, isn't it it ironic that the time in our lives when our brains are growing and our brains are formulating and we're trying to learn so much that we're consuming this toxin that's shrinking our gray matter in our brain, which it literally does, inhibits our cognitive function. It's all quite hypocritical to me, and it bothers me. And in hindsight, I want to highlight the toxicity of the drinking culture that I came from. It's not what you would assume a textbook definition of like an alcoholic or somebody that's struggling with alcohol would look like. When you think of somebody who's an alcoholic, I'm sure you have an image that you conjure up in your mind of somebody who's like homeless or drinking out of a brown paper bag, or, you know, getting into fights every time that they drink. But I think what a lot of people don't realize is that alcohol abuse can occur in a setting where it's so normalized that people don't realize how much of an issue it is. And that's where I think my fault was. I didn't think it was an issue. I thought it was normal. I thought it was normal to black out every weekend. I thought it was normal to have 3-4 day hangovers. I thought it was normal to unwind every weekend by just drinking so much alcohol, and that was just the normal thing to do because that's what everybody in society does. I didn't see that there was an issue with it, and I think it's just a product of the environments that I was in. You know, media glamorizes it and normalizes it. Society glamorizes it and normalizes it. Think about any celebration, any event. Weddings are huge times for alcohol consumption. It's totally normalized, totally glamorized and encouraged. Even funerals, not to be morbid, but I think in a lot of cultures, at least in the Western sphere, drinking is encouraged after like you do a funeral for somebody. Birthdays, anniversaries, vacations, all of these celebrations, all of these events, it's so normalized for us to be consuming alcohol that it becomes counterculture and counter-normative, or against the norm rather, to not consume alcohol in them. So you're in that kind of hamster wheel. It feels like it's normal to do because it's just the way things are. Everybody drinks on the weekends. Everybody in college is getting blackout. Now I say that in hindsight, obviously not everybody was. It was just probably the product of like the culture that I was in and the people that I was hanging out with. Again, no shade to any of them, but it was just a setting where it was totally accepted and normalized and frowned upon if you didn't participate in that. That's kind of my background with alcohol. I don't think I've ever spoken about this as candidly as I am here. Even though I'm 3.5 years alcohol free, it still is like very vulnerable for me to share like that was what my drinking pattern was. But I really hope that somebody gets some kind of benefit out of this or relates to this in any way, because I know so many people in college, even people that have messaged me from my school 2 years later, that have told me that they had the same experience of being on that hamster wheel of drinking being so normalized, and then finally waking up one day and realizing that that is not what it's about. So we'll transition now into what sort of made me stop. So for me, it wasn't like a cold turkey thing per se. It was sort of a slow, gradual realization for me that alcohol was holding me back mentally and physically. And I think that came from a couple of things. I think it came from some experiences that I had gone through. 2019 is when I stopped drinking, just in case you're curious. December 31st, 2019, or December 30th, 2019 was my last drink. December 31st was my first day of no alcohol. And there were a lot of things that kind of led me to that decision, and it wasn't like an overnight epiphany. I would say for me, it was more so a gradual realization that alcohol was holding me back. And it really coincided strongly for me with my spiritual awakening. 2019 is when everything started to really change for me. That's when I started understanding spiritual kind of ideas and esoteric topics like energy, frequency, and vibration, and discovering myself. And I think it kind of just really culminated from like a rock bottom place for me. I still to this day consider the end of 2019 to be rock bottom for me in a lot of different ways that I'm not gonna fully get into here, but just a lot of things that really forced me to face myself and snap out of it and say, you know, Haley, we cannot continue going the way we're going now if we want to have a good life. That was the point that I really started questioning my relationship with alcohol. I started thinking to myself, why am I doing this? What is this for? How does this serve me? What is the purpose of me consuming this toxin all the time. And so for me, it became a gradual unraveling and unlearning of societal norms, of questioning things. And it was so closely intertwined with my spiritual awakening that I don't think that I would be sober now if I had not experienced that initial awakening. So I dabbled with really scaling back my alcohol consumption, I would say like October and November, December of 2019, where I would just have maybe like 1 or 2 drinks a month, which for me was like a huge reduction from where I was. And even when I had those 1 to 2 drinks, I really didn't like how I felt afterwards, didn't like how it made me feel, and it didn't feel like an aligned action for me in terms of where I was trying to go with my life. And so fast forward, the very last night I drank, I think I've told this story like many times on this channel, but it was a Zedd concert in 2019. It was in the Brooklyn Navy Yard, if you guys are familiar. Shout out if anyone was at that concert, by the way. And my friends and I had champagne glasses, and so we went to cheers the glasses. Cheers, is that a word? I don't know. Salute? Cheers, I don't know. Well, whatever, you know what I'm saying. So we went to go cheers the glasses, and that was when I really had, I would say, probably the closest thing to like an epiphany moment of, why am I doing this? This isn't fun. I'm gonna wake up hungover, I'm gonna feel like shit. I don't think I wanna do this anymore. And so we cheersed those glasses, and that was the last drink I ever had, and I have not looked back since then. So that's kind of my history with alcohol, my relationship with it, where I'm coming from. Honestly, coming from the party girl scene for a pretty short period of my life, but definitely enough in that time span for me to understand that alcohol wasn't serving me. My main hope with me sharing that is to tell you that like, you don't have to fit the textbook definition of an alcoholic to have an issue with it or to realize that you need to scale back on it or cut it out completely. I think it's very much a gray area. It's very much a spectrum. People fall on all different areas of the spectrum. There's binge drinkers, there's gray area drinkers, there's people that drink every night, there's people like me who would just take it way too hard every single weekend. And it's not one size fits all. I think it definitely comes down to you and questioning if it's serving you in your life. And if you think you've fallen victim to some of these cultural, you know, activities and situations that encourage you to drink heavily, I would encourage you to, even watching this now, whether you think you are or you're not, ask yourself like, what is my relationship with alcohol and what role does it play in my life? That's enough of that. I want to get into the second part of this video, which is things that people will not tell you or like don't tell you when you stop drinking, or like unexpected things that have happened. I want to say as a disclaimer, I'm speaking from my experience. I can't speak for everyone. I can speak for myself. So I'm sharing that. I've been alcohol free for 3.5 years now. Pretty damn long time, which is like so crazy and so amazing to think. So I think I can kind of speak on this coming from where I've been with alcohol and where I am now without it. So first thing I want to say is kind of just like changes that I noticed for me, like when I first stopped drinking. For the first like month, I felt great. I had no hangovers. I literally used to be hungover so much, you could not pay me $1 million to experience a hangover again. So already off the bat, I was like, wow, I'm not hungover. I started feeling like clarity, mental clarity, that was really refreshing. And I also want to add the disclaimer, I know this is kind of all over the place, but I never had the intention of quitting alcohol forever. I knew that it wasn't playing a valuable role in my life, and I wanted to kind of see where a dry January would take me, and I was already really into the idea of just like moderate drinking, reducing my consumption tremendously. And then after those 30 days of dry January, I was like, wait a minute, I feel so good. I am not going back to that shit anymore. Like, I feel so good without it. Why would I go back to it? But I do want to say, and it's funny because I'm so vocal about this now, but for the first 6 months of my alcohol-free journey, I was so afraid to tell people that I wasn't drinking anymore, because I had so many friends and I knew so many family members too that like we would always hang out. There was always alcohol at the center of our activities. Family would come over for holidays, we would drink together, friends, we would drink together. And so I kind of finagled a way around it to have convenient excuses for when people would ask me why I wasn't drinking. This was 2020, right before the pandemic hit. And at the time I was working at a fitness studio and we were doing a transformation challenge. You know, you'd have to like lose a certain amount of percentage of body fat during an 8-week span or something like that. And so a lot of people inherently in that decided to cut drinking because it was a great way to help them get in shape. So during that time, some of the friends I would work with would ask me, you know, to hang out or do something. And I would be like, oh, I'm not drinking now. And they would ask why. And I would just say, oh, it's for the transformation challenge. And then people would kind of be like, oh, well, that makes sense. That's okay. And see, even in that, where it's like, there's still this subconscious feeling sometimes of like having to justify your reason for not drinking, which is so crazy because it's like, it's the only substance that people will question you for not doing. Like, think about any other drug, Coke, heroin, whatever, or cigarettes. Nobody's gonna question you for why you aren't doing that, right? But for some reason, alcohol is viewed in a different lens of like, oh, you're not drinking? You're not drinking? What's wrong with you? And so it's just kind of interesting. Like, I don't know why that is. I think it's just our whole society is just very much centered around it. But anyways, I digress. So for 6 months, I was really afraid to kind of share that, you know, that I was thinking I was done with alcohol for good, because I was afraid that people were gonna judge me. I was afraid people were gonna make assumptions about me, and there was a lot of mental fear there. So I kind of just kept that decision to myself. I don't think I even really told a lot of my family members that I was done with it. I really did not tell many people for the first 6 months. I pretty much just made a pact to myself and a vow to myself that I didn't want it anymore, and that I knew it didn't serve me, and that I recognized how good and how amazing I felt without it, and how much I was changing without it, that I knew that there was no going back. And even physically with workouts and, you know, getting my body comp where I wanted it to be, cutting it out helped tremendously. I think that goes without saying. It made a huge transformation for me physically, helped my hair grow a lot, it helped my skin clear up, and it kind of was convenient for me because the pandemic shut everything down. So I know that that was a time where a lot of people were drinking more than they would have, but for me, it eliminated the social pressure of going out to bars, going out to clubs, and like hanging out with people. So where I was at home, like I said, even back in college, it wasn't like I was drinking every night, it was just when I would go out. And I think the root of that in hindsight was a lot of social anxiety. It was a big crutch for me. Alcohol was a big crutch for me. So fast forward to like the 6-month mark, I started searching on Instagram and just on the internet. I was like, I wonder if anyone else out there just decided to stop drinking, but they aren't necessarily an alcoholic, and they didn't necessarily go through AA or rehab or some kind of recovery program. And I thought I was completely alone, okay? I genuinely, for those first 6 months, I was alone. Nobody was like supporting me in that way. There was nobody that really fully understood that I was quitting drinking. I kind of just like figured it out on my own. And then eventually I was like, you know what? I want to see if there's more people that have sort of been through this. And lo and behold, there were tons of people. I searched on Instagram, I just searched alcohol free, and I stumbled upon 1,000 Hours Dry. That was one of the first pages I found. Reframe was one of the first pages that I found. Shout out, I actually work for them now, which is again another blessing in terms of like how this has changed my life so much. Alex McRobert, also known as Sober Yoga Girl. She was the first person that I had on my podcast back in 2020, and that was like my coming out. I know it sounds so silly, but that was like my coming out to the world that I wasn't drinking anymore. And I was so afraid to put myself out there in that way. It's a super vulnerable thing to do, right? And I posted about it on Instagram, and I was so afraid that people were gonna judge me or, you know, make assumptions or say nasty things. Honestly, it was the exact opposite. I was met with so much support and so much love from people that were really supportive of my journey. And even messages from people that I've known from high school and from college and even like my childhood that have reached out and said, thank you, you know, for sharing this. I've been going through something similar, or I'm thinking about ditching alcohol too. And so that made me really feel not alone. And that also showed me that there's so many other people out there that are in that position. So that was really what inspired me to talk about this as much as I do. And ever since then, I've been talking about it. Like I said, I work for Reframe, which is an app that helps people change their relationship with alcohol. So making videos every day about the benefits of ditching alcohol. So it's something I talk about all the time. That's sort of where I'm at now, 3.5 years alcohol free. I wouldn't change it for the world. I haven't looked back since, haven't had a sip of alcohol since. At this point, I'm just like so good without it. In my journey, there's a few things, like I said, that people are not gonna tell you. The first one being that depending on how you decide to break up with booze, right? You might feel really anxious and insecure about your decision to stop drinking, and you might not feel comfortable with telling people your reasoning right away. I know for me, I was not comfortable with that right away. And I think in the beginning, it's okay to have like not a canned answer ready to go, but in the society that we live in, I hate when people say we live in a society, but in the culture that we live in, where alcohol is the center of a lot of social interaction, it can help for you to have an answer ready for when people ask you why you aren't drinking. Because as I mentioned earlier, for some reason, it's still kind of viewed as like a taboo thing to not drink. And so if you go into any social situation having an answer ready to go. What if you're not comfortable yet, you know, being fully authentically yourself. Like for me now, I walk into anywhere I go, I'm like, I don't drink, I've been alcohol free for over 3 years, I'm good. And nobody questions it. People just get it. They're like, okay, awesome, no worries. I've never had someone pressure me in real life, I'll tell you that. I've never had someone judge me in real life. I've never had someone, you know, pander even more once I give them that answer. It's kind of just like, all right, cool, no worries. I can tell you that most people in real life are not going to judge you as much as you think they are. And also, most people in real life do not care what's in your cup. They really, really don't. If you're at an event and everybody else is drunk and someone offers you something and you decline, they're probably just going to go about their business. Nobody really cares what's in your cup, right? At the end of the day, it's really none of their business and they're probably preoccupied anyway. So let that be something to kind of ease your anxiety in a situation. And speaking of cup, another tip that I would have is to just bring your own options to an event. If you're really anxious about it, if you don't know if there's gonna be anything that's non-alcoholic there, bring something along. For me, anytime I go to like a house party or like a dinner somewhere at someone's house, I always try to bring like, this is bubbly, I don't usually bring this, but if you guys want me to show you like what I usually bring, I can do another video on that. But I'll bring like some of my own options just so that I know that I have something, because sometimes it's literally just the act of holding something in your hand to kind of ease that social anxiety. For me, in my experience, I can tell you that's 1000% what it is, because even when I'm just holding a beverage in my hand at a party, I feel like I'm able to socialize more and I just feel more comfortable, and it's kind of like a little security blanket. So people may not tell you that at first. You may not realize at first that social anxiety might be a big trigger for you to drink. So if you have an option, or if you have something in your hands just to hold like this, then that can help you out tremendously. Few other things I want to say in terms of what people won't tell you will happen. You will gain so much confidence. Like mentally, you will have so much more clarity. You will be so much more sure of who you are when you've removed alcohol from the equation, because you really can't get to know yourself truly, and you can't get to know what your hobbies and your interests are when a substance like alcohol is in the picture a lot of the time. It's really hard, and it kind of like muddies up the waters of getting to know who you are. So when you remove that, you're forced to face yourself in a way that you've never faced yourself before. I'll say that was probably the biggest thing for me, is there is no more running away. Because there is no more scapegoat for numbing your feelings or escaping something or transmuting something. You have to face it head on, because you're sober. There's nothing there to cloud you. There's nothing there to numb you. So you will get to know yourself in a way that you've never known yourself before. Be prepared to do a lot of inner work and a lot of shadow work, and be prepared to get to know yourself all over again. Get to know who you are and what you love to do that doesn't involve alcohol. I feel like in a lot of ways, I became a completely different person once I stopped drinking. I finally found out what I was interested in. I finally found my sense of self-worth. I finally found a sense of confidence. The list goes on. Mental clarity, deeper spiritual connection. I don't say this for everyone, but I say this for people who are in a position like me where it was a big part of their lives. So be prepared for that growth. Be prepared for that expansion. It's not easy, uncomfortable at times, it's challenging, but it's so, so rewarding. It is the most rewarding thing I think I've ever done in my entire life. And it's the most empowering thing I've ever done in my entire life, was deciding to make a change for myself and for my health, and that I was going to take my power back. There's really nothing else that I've done that really has equated to that level of just sovereignty and understanding myself and feeling comfortable in who I am. I did it alone. I would not recommend that. I would recommend finding support in whatever that looks like for you, whatever resonates with you. There's tons of people on Instagram, there's tons of different programs, there's different apps that you can use, like Reframe, for example. So there's tons of different things. You just kind of have to see what works for you, but don't be afraid to reach out to, you know, your family, your loved ones, your friends. You're not going to be as judged as you might think you will be. That was a big thing for me too. I was so afraid of judgment, and I even remember with certain family members that they did not believe me at first when I told them. I was like, yeah, I'm not drinking. They were like, huh, we'll see how long that lasts. years. And here I am 3.5 years later and I still haven't had a sip of it. So people are not gonna judge you as much as you think. A lot of that judgment is in your head, and I think a lot of it is the fear of the unknown of what somebody's reaction is going to be to that. You'd be surprised how many people will accept you with open arms and with support. And if someone judges you for that decision, right? If someone's judging you for not drinking, that's definitely more so a reflection of them than it is of you. So I would really just try to set boundaries with those kind of people. And that's another point that I want to transition into. And this is kind of like, I don't want to say it's a downside of it, but it's something that I've noticed in my journey that's been more challenging. You're gonna lose people from your life when you stop drinking. You will lose friends, you will lose people that you've known. It's no one's fault. It's not their fault, it's not your fault. But I think it just comes down to being in a different place in your life. And I'm not saying that from a point of, oh, I'm so much better than so-and-so because I don't drink anymore and they still drink. It's just, you're on a different wavelength, right? If there's people in my life that every single time we hung out, we were drinking. I can't remember a single time that I had a social interaction with them where we weren't both intoxicated. You know, I considered them friends at the time, and then once I stopped drinking, they kind of fell off. And it's sad. It is sad because, you know, you think that you're such good friends with people and they kind of just slip away. But part of what I've realized in my journey is that, again, it's nobody's fault. I don't have any ill will or like bad feelings towards anybody that's sort of like fallen out of my life at this point. It just comes down to differences in the lifestyle that you live. If they're drinking every weekend, if they're still doing the same thing they did when they were in college, when you were partying, and you're, you know, doing yoga and meditation, you're probably not gonna be on the same wavelength anymore. And I'm fine with that. I've come to a place where I've accepted that, but it's definitely been a challenge. But I have to remind myself, there's people that I was friends with like a few years ago, and if you think I could go to dinner with them and talk about solfeggio frequencies and aliens and esoteric stuff that I talk about here on this channel, I know they would probably have no part of it. And it's nothing against them. It's just growing pains, right? As you grow, as you evolve, as you change, so too will your social circle. And I can say now that I'm surrounded by people that genuinely respect my decision to not drink, and we have fun together in ways that don't involve alcohol, and just being surrounded by a really awesome group of people now, which is great. And it took a long time for me. I think COVID made it harder, but it definitely took a long time for me to find people that were aligned with me now. And that's another thing I want to say, is that when you stop drinking, right, you get to know yourself better, you get to be more confident in your own skin, you get to understand your values, you get to understand who you are as a person, what you want, what you desire. You're gonna be a hell of a lot more picky with your romantic prospects and with your friends. I can tell you now, my standards in terms of like the dating pool have gone way up from what they were a few years ago. And even my standards for friendships have gone up too. And I'm not saying that to discredit anyone that I'm like friends with or have been friends with, but just in terms of, for me, a huge thing is having common interests and being able to enjoy shared activities. And I want to be friends with other people that don't rely on alcohol every single time they socialize in order for them to have friends. There's tons of ways to have fun that don't involve drinking. And so that's like a huge standard that I have for myself now. For romantic partners, my standards, like my options have shrunk tremendously because it's an important issue to me. I can't date somebody who's getting blackout drunk every weekend. I don't want to date somebody who's still in their party phase. That's a huge deal to me. And it's something that I'm not willing to compromise on. And I'm not saying that to like, again, make it sound like I'm better than anybody else, because that's not what this is about. It's just about differences in what you like. If you have preferences, if you're a super outdoorsy person and you want to go hiking and you want to date somebody who's going to go hiking and camping with you, then you're probably not going to want to date somebody who wants to live in a city and is afraid to get their feet in the dirt. It's the same thing for me. It's a preference to me at this point. To me at this point, it's even more so like entering deal breaker territory. And I'm not saying that somebody has to be like sober, but I just don't want somebody that has alcohol at the center of their life. My camera battery is about to die. I'm trying to think if there's any last minute things that'll change. So let's review what's gonna change for you. Things that people aren't gonna tell you. You're gonna get more confident. It's gonna be hard at first. You might not feel comfortable telling people your reasonings for not drinking. You're gonna get a lot more picky with friends and romantic acquaintances. You're gonna raise your standards and you're gonna have a glow up. I wanna end it with saying that. You are going to have a glow up. Your skin is gonna get better. Your hair is gonna get longer. Your mind is going to get clearer. You'll You'll maybe lose weight too, if that's something that's, you know, if the empty calories. You will have a physical glow up. You'll be able to do much better in the gym. You'll be able to get better recovery, so you'll be able to exercise better, and you're gonna become the best version of yourself. I wanna end this by saying that you will become the best version of yourself. And I think enough people say that, but that's just something I wanna throw in there, is expect to be elevated in every area of your life. Expect to be elevated mentally, physically, spiritually, emotionally. Expect to take your power back completely, because that is what will happen when you make a change that radical. My battery's dying. I really want to continue talking with this. If you guys want me to make another video about this or go a little bit more in depth on anything that I spoke about in here, please drop a comment down below. Let me know. If you've made it this far, I know we're vibing, so go ahead and hit that subscribe button. I would love to have you here, and just know that you've always got a friend in me. I know what it's like to be alcohol free, and I know what it's like to be in that party phase too. And I'm here for you. If you have any questions, drop them down below. Let's be friends. Let's lift each other up, man. Life is too short. I think, you know, there's no place for judgment here, at least on this channel. I'm not judging you. If you're making a healthy change, that is just the absolute most awesome thing ever. So without further ado, my friends, that is it for today's pillow talk, and I hopefully will see you guys soon. And I'm just kind of rambling now, so I'm gonna go ahead and turn this off. Okay, bye.